Larry, when we saw all these polls, you were the first person we wanted to talk to. So break it all down for us. Big picture, what's your takeaway? I think Larry is frozen, so we're going to wait a second. Evan, what was your take here?
Well, I don't want to step in for Larry Sabato when it comes to polls. I understand he's frozen, but when he's unfrozen, it's going to be amazing. I will say this. Look, you mentioned at the top of the show that polls are a snapshot. We shouldn't take a prediction from them. But, from my perspective, like a narrative perspective, all these polls that are coming out, you'd rather be Harris than Trump. Looking at these polls. And that's, good for her, obviously. We don't know what it means in the long run, but talking about the idea of this debate being a huge game changer for the election, I think it sort of pushed Harris's momentum even further and really pushed her away from Trump a bit. It just speaks to all the good news she's had since she's just sort of found herself with this nomination after President Biden dropped out. It's really been a 6 years of successes for her. And these polls just sort of help to solidify the fact that she's doing so well in this weird environment that she's found herself in.
Okay, but then here's what stuck out to me, McKay. One poll found that voters do think Harris performed better in the debate, but in the post-debate polling, it hasn't really moved the needle. So what does that say about voters right now? How locked in are they? Could there really be a lot of undecided voters left if a whole bunch watched that debate and still they didn't really move? I mean, come on, there was a clear, decisive winner.
Right. And I think there's a difference for a lot of voters between acknowledging that one candidate performed better than another and thinking that they would rather that person be president. I do think, though, that to Evan's point, when you look at these polls, you have to look at where they're going directionally, right? And directionally speaking, Harris is creeping up. She's not creeping up in the polls far enough that she's getting outside the margin of error. She's not running away with it. I think we might be past the era of presidential politics where either candidate can ever have, a 60% landslide or win 48 states. I think we're an incredibly polarized country. No candidate is ever going to win by more than a few points. I will say, though, that what I found most interesting was not actually the polls that are showing her creeping up in these various states, but actually polls that ask voters who they think will win. Washington Post had a good piece about this by Aaron Blake, kind of breaking down this question of which candidate do you think is going to win? And Harris, in almost every poll, it wins there by a much larger margin, 10, 11, 12 points. Most people seem to think that Harris is going to win. And if you look back at presidential elections over the past 60 years, that is actually a more predictive question than asking people who they want to win, who they want to vote for. The reason being, there are a bunch of theories about this, but one of the theories is that basically when voters are answering that question, they're not just taking into account their own preferences, they're taking into account the preferences of the people that they know in their circles, their neighbors, their family. They become kind of mini anthropologists. And that actually has proven to be fairly predictive. So if you want to look for good news for Harris, the fact that significant majorities outside the margin of error think that she's going to win, that does bode well for her campaign.
Now, that is interesting. And Larry, unfortunately for you, you were frozen. You are our polling expert. But I had to ask these two guys, and they really gave great responses. So the bar just got a whole lot higher. What were your big takeaways?
Well, I couldn't hear what they said, at least for the most part. And I'm sorry I was frozen, but I was so shocked by the report you gave about Mark Robinson. I just couldn't move, and I hope that's okay. Look, as far as polling is concerned, I think people need to remember at all times that all polling today can do, with all of its flaws and inaccuracies, is to tell you that candidate A is well ahead, or that candidate B is well ahead, or that it's so close you really can't tell which candidate is ahead, or the polls aren't predictive. I go with the third option, certainly in this case. Now, having said that, which candidate has moved up and which candidate has moved down? Obviously, Kamala Harris has moved up and Donald Trump has moved down. The problem is the national vote doesn't matter at all, and we have 43 states sitting there watching the 7 states that will impose a new president on the rest of us for the next 4 years. And those states happen to be, with only a couple of exceptions, so close that they are literally tied or certainly within the margin of error. And by the way, good research suggests that the margin of error is actually about double what the pollsters actually list, because there are so many sources of error that cannot be quantified. So we'll be much better off when we all realize that polls are not votes and that we really shouldn't pay that much attention to them, and that those who are in politics or care about the results should just be working and volunteering and giving money. How about that?
All right, I'll take that. That's some good education for all of us out there. Evan, Democrats are in the best spot they have been in all year. And at the same time, this thing is razor thin. Which of those points matters more?
That is the 64,000, 64 million, however big donation you want to make, question of this entire election, right? This whole thing comes down to what is actually going to happen at the end of this race, because we have a candidate in Donald Trump who we've seen unite the Republican Party in a way that he had not done before. You see a lot of excitement for him when you go out and you see people who really like him a lot. And then you see this idea of Harris, who, relatively unknown, comes in late in the game, but just pumps all this enthusiasm in the Democratic side. And those two things are what are competing with each other right now. And it may come down to the really nitty gritty stuff like ground game operations. We did some stories about that in Notice just the other day, talking about the ground game operations. This is what we're looking at now. It's like this is a gut out fight to the end, and whoever has sort of like the most best stuff, I guess, is sort of a silly way of saying it. That's how it's going to work out, I think.
The most best stuff. That's Evan's best writing right there. Okay, Larry, a political columnist writes that there are 3 states that matter, just 3 states. It's Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. A, do you agree? And B, do you think this race can be won without Pennsylvania?
Number one, I do not agree. And number 2, I believe that it can be won under certain circumstances without Pennsylvania. Look, we just said 43 states aren't in this thing. There are only 7, and I respect Jonathan Martin. He's an old friend. It's great what he wrote, and I see his point. But don't you think it would make more sense if we didn't narrow down the mere 7 states that we have that are truly competitive to 3? Because I can see other pathways, really, for either candidate to win 270 electoral votes. And I think the candidates can see that, too, and their strategists can see that. So Pennsylvania is important, and North Carolina is important, and Georgia is important, but so are Wisconsin and Michigan and Nevada and Arizona. And so we look at different combinations of these states, and let's keep doing that. Let's keep the door open to new events and new calculations.
All right, at the risk of Larry going frozen again, let's talk about Mark Robinson, North Carolina lieutenant governor, and this new CNN report. He's denying that he called himself a black Nazi on a pornography website, and he is vowing to stay in this race. Here's my question, McKay. There is all this pressure. Oh, my God, pressure. Should he step down? Should he step aside? Let's get real. With Donald Trump as the leader of the Republican Party, right, the person who sets the bar, do you see any scenario where a Republican will step down for any reason?
I mean, this is the key point, right? When you have the leader of your party who has said outrageous, offensive, racist, xenophobic, anti-Semitic things, who lies constantly, who has been caught in affairs, in all kind of unseemly, unsavory personal behavior, and who has basically weathered it. At least in terms of, his standing in the Republican Party, you don't set any kind of incentive structure that would cause somebody like Mark Robinson to say, wow, I don't think I can survive this. I'm going to drop out. Now, look, it's possible that the party in the state could do what the Democratic Party essentially did to Joe Biden, which is, pressure mounts, donors pull out. The problem is the deadline is so soon, like you noted, that there's probably not enough time.
Okay, come on. Who are the Republicans in the party that are going to put the pressure on? Give me a break. Marjorie Taylor Greene.
This is the interesting thing.
Matt Gaetz. They're going to pressure. Who's going to pressure him?
The interesting thing is that in the North Carolina State Republican Party, the establishment hates this guy. Like, Republican operatives are constantly leaking against him. The rest of the elected Republicans in the state don't like him. The problem is that he's not beholden to them at all. He is following the Trump path where he doesn't need the Republican establishment in North Carolina to continue to run his campaign. He is, he fancies himself this anti-establishment outsider populist. That's how he's positioned himself. There really is not a lot of leverage that the state party has to get him off the ticket. But to your point, they also probably aren't even going to try very hard because, you have the Donald Trump precedent right there. I will say, though, I'm not really sure that Mark Robinson should bank on being able to do the Teflon Don thing that Trump has pulled off, because we've seen this over and over again. A lot of Republican politicians seem to think that they can do what Trump has done, that they can weather these storms and stick around, that the laws of political gravity don't apply to them. And then they find out that they still do. And so I'm not sure that he should be making that calculation himself.